An elderly woman leaves her hometown to live with her son in a luxurious mansion in London, believing she can finally rest. But behind the sophisticated walls, she finds a cruel reality commanded by her own daughter-in-law. Confined, humiliated, and invisible, she begins to waste away in silence until an unexpected visit ignites a spark of hope. What follows reveals not only guarded secrets, but also the silent strength of a woman who refused to disappear. The afternoon sun lazily streamed through the curtain gaps in the back bedroom of the mansion in the Upper East Side, a prestigious neighborhood in New York City. Eleanor, a 72-year-old woman, watched the cars move on the tree-lined street from her window, her wrinkled fingers caressing a time-worn rosary. From her small room she could hear the splashing of water in the pool and the laughter of her daughter-in-law, Deborah, who was hosting friends for afternoon tea in the garden. Eleanor sighed. The 3-story mansion, with 6 bedrooms, a pool, and an elaborate garden, was so different from the small restaurant she had run for 30 years in Oxford, Mississippi. There, amidst pots and the warmth of a wood-burning stove, she had raised her only son, Maurice, alone after her husband had left too soon, leaving her a widow at 27. The click of heels in the hallway made her shoulders stiffen. The door opened unceremoniously. "Eleanor, the guests have left. You can come out now, but remember what we agreed. No appearing when we have company." Deborah spoke without looking directly at her mother-in-law, checking her impeccably red-painted nails. "Yes, my dear. I understand." Eleanor replied with a timid smile. "Don't call me my dear," Deborah cut in dryly. "I've told you I don't like it. And please, wear that outfit I bought for you. I don't want you walking around the house in those old rags. Maurice is coming home early for dinner tonight." Eleanor nodded in silence. The old rags were her clothes from Mississippi, simple but well-maintained, in which she felt like herself. The clothes Deborah bought her were nice, but Eleanor felt like she was in costume, as if she were playing a role in a poorly written play. When her daughter-in-law left, slamming the door without gentleness, Eleanor allowed herself a tear. For a year and a half, she had been living in her son's house in New York City. Maurice had insisted she come after an episode of high blood pressure that had left her hospitalized for 3 days. "Mom, you can't stay alone in Mississippi anymore. Come live with me in New York City. We have plenty of space and you'll finally be able to rest." The promised rest never came. In front of Maurice, Deborah was all smiles and attention. "Eleanor, would you like more salad?" "Maurice, doesn't your mother look tired? Let's let her rest." "Honey, I bought that tea your mother likes." It was an impeccable performance that dissolved as soon as her son left for work. In the first few weeks, Eleanor tried to win over her daughter-in-law. She offered to help in the kitchen, to teach Southern recipes, to tend to the garden she so admired. Deborah refused all offers with thinly veiled disdain. "Eleanor, we have staff for that. You don't need to worry." But when the staff wasn't around, it was a different story. "You're not just going to stand there all day, are you? Since you insist on helping so much, you can organize that pantry cabinet. It's a mess." Soon enough, Eleanor understood the household dynamic. For Maurice, she was his beloved mother, deserving of every comfort after years of sacrifice. For Deborah, she was an inconvenience, an intruder who threatened her control over the house and her husband. Rose, the housekeeper who came 3 times a week, was the first to notice what was happening. She found Eleanor cleaning the service bathroom, on her knees, her hands red from scrubbing so much. "Eleanor, for heaven's sake, let me do that. You're the boss's mother," Rose exclaimed, horrified. "Shush, child. Deborah said I have to make myself useful, or she'll tell Maurice I'm going senile and need a nursing home," Eleanor confessed in a low voice. Rose sat beside her on the cold floor. "You need to tell Maurice this isn't right." Eleanor shook her head, resolute. "I can't, Rose. Maurice loves that woman. He works so hard, worries so much about me. I don't want to cause problems in his marriage. He seems happy, and that's enough for me." But Maurice's happiness came at a price, and Eleanor was paying it daily. In addition to constant humiliations, the food served to her was always different. While the family savored elaborate dishes prepared by the private chef who came 3 times a week, Eleanor was given leftovers or simple, unseasoned meals, served on different crockery, in her room or the kitchen, never at the table with her son and daughter-in-law. "Your mother already had dinner, honey. She was tired and preferred to eat early." This was Deborah's frequent excuse when Maurice asked about his mother's absence at the table. In recent months, Eleanor's body began to protest. She lost considerable weight, her blood pressure fluctuated, and episodes of dizziness became common. The previous week, she fainted in the kitchen while washing dishes, hidden from Rose. It was the housekeeper who found her and helped her recover, promising not to tell Maurice anything at Eleanor's request. "Eleanor, you need to see a doctor," Rose insisted. "Deborah said it would be too much trouble, that I just want attention," Eleanor replied, embarrassed. That night, as she got ready for dinner with her son, Eleanor looked at her reflection in the small bedroom mirror, her thin face, sunken eyes, white hair pulled back in a simple bun. She remembered when she was young, full of dreams, how she had bravely faced life after becoming a widow, how she had worked tirelessly to give Maurice a decent life. "What happened to me?" she whispered to the mirror. The question went unanswered, interrupted by a soft knock on the door. "Eleanor, your son just arrived." It was Rose, with a sad smile on her face. Eleanor took a deep breath, adjusted the outfit Deborah had chosen, a dull grey dress that made her look older and faded, and left the room. It was time for another performance of the play Happy Family, where she had the least important role, but without which the show would make no sense. The dinner scene unfolded as usual, Deborah perfectly playing the role of the attentive daughter-in-law, Maurice tired after another exhausting day at the construction company he had founded, and Eleanor trying to occupy as little space as possible at the table, responding with monosyllables when questioned directly. "Mom, you're thinner. Are you eating properly?" Maurice asked, observing his mother with concern as he cut a piece of perfectly grilled filet mignon. Before Eleanor could answer, Deborah interjected. "Honey, your mother has been eating really well. Just today for lunch I made that vegetable soup she loves, didn't I, Eleanor?" Eleanor nodded, avoiding looking at her daughter-in-law. The vegetable soup had, in fact, been a thin broth with leftovers from the previous day, served cold, as Deborah had forbidden Eleanor from using the stove when she was alone at home. "I don't want fires in my Italian marble kitchen," she justified, as if her mother-in-law, who had spent her entire life cooking professionally, didn't know how to light a stove. "I'm fine, my son. Just a little tired," she finally replied, trying to smile. "It must be age, honey," Deborah commented with a falsely sympathetic tone. "Your mother is already over 70. It's natural for the body to start weakening." The disdainful look she gave her mother-in-law contradicted her worried words. Maurice looked at his mother more closely. "Mom, I want you to go to the doctor tomorrow. I'll ask Rose to accompany you to Dr. Charles. He's excellent and takes care of our whole family." "Maurice, drop it. Your mother is fine, just a little tired. Doctors are expensive and—" Deborah tried to intervene but was interrupted by her husband. "Deborah, money is not an issue, and my mother's health is priceless." In that moment, Eleanor saw a glimmer of the determined boy she had raised. Memories transported her back decades, to when they still lived in the small house behind the restaurant in Oxford. Maurice was only 7 years old when his father suddenly died of a heart attack. Eleanor, a widow at 27, with a small restaurant and debts to pay, watched her world crumble. But she had no time for lamentations. On the night of her husband's wake, while her son slept, exhausted from crying so much, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table and did the math. The money would last 3 months at most. After that, they'd be on the streets. The next day, she rose before the sun, as she always had, to help her husband open the restaurant. She put on her apron, lit the stove, and began preparing breakfast for the customers. The only difference was that now she was alone. "Mum, what are you doing?" asked little Maurice, still in his pajamas, his eyes swollen from crying so much. "I'm working, my son. Life goes on," she replied, swallowing her own tears so as not to falter in front of the boy. "But what about Dad?" "Your dad will help us from above now. Down here it's just the 2 of us." That day Eleanor opened the restaurant as usual, ignoring the pitying glances of the customers. That night, after closing, she sat with Maurice and explained the situation. "Son, it will be difficult, but we will make it. I promise there will never be a lack of food on our table, that you will continue studying, and that one day you will be proud of your mother." And so it was. During the day, Eleanor managed the restaurant with a firm hand. At night, after putting her son to sleep, she sewed clothes on commission to supplement their income. She slept only 4 or 5 hours a night, but never complained. On weekends, she sold cakes and sweets at fairs to ensure Maurice had school supplies. In rare moments of rest, she would sit beside her son and listen to his school stories, his dreams, his discoveries. Maurice grew up witnessing his mother's efforts. At 12, he was already helping at the restaurant after school. At 15, he earned a scholarship to a private school thanks to his exemplary grades. At 18, he was accepted into civil engineering at the University of Mississippi, one of the best in the state. "Mom, when I graduate, I'm going to give you a better life. I'll build huge buildings and we'll live in a penthouse apartment," the teenager would say, full of plans. Eleanor smiled, pleased to see her son dreaming big, but without ceasing to be the humble and hard-working boy she had raised. "My son, I already have a good life. I have you." During college, Maurice continued to help at the restaurant on weekends, but Eleanor insisted that his priority be his studies. "Your future is in books, not in pots and pans," she would say, when she found him too tired to study after a hard day's work. When Maurice graduated with honors, Eleanor closed the restaurant for the first time in 25 years to attend the graduation ceremony. Sitting in the audience, wearing her best dress, the same one she had worn at her own wedding, adjusted to fit her now thinner body, Eleanor cried silently as her son received his diploma. "This achievement is yours, Mom," Maurice said, finding her after the ceremony, handing her his diploma scroll. "Every page I studied, every sleepless night, every challenge I faced was with you in mind." 2 months later, Maurice received a job offer in New York City at a large construction company. The salary was 3 times higher than he could get in Memphis, Tennessee. Eleanor didn't hesitate. "Go, my son, it's your chance." "But what about you, Mom? And the restaurant?" "I'll manage. I always have. The restaurant has been here for almost 30 years. It won't disappear just because you're pursuing your path." With a heavy heart, but full of hope, Eleanor said goodbye to her son at the bus station. They promised to talk every day by phone, and Maurice assured her he would visit whenever possible. Eleanor returned home alone to a silence that now seemed heavier, more definitive. But she didn't allow herself to falter. She had a restaurant to manage and a distant son to continue inspiring with her example. Years passed. Maurice, as he had promised, called daily. Every 6 months, he returned to Oxford for a week-long visit. He spoke of his work, his projects, his increasingly larger apartment. In 5 years, he left the construction company where he had been hired and started his own business. In 10, he was already a respected entrepreneur in the New York City real estate market. It was on one of his visits that he first mentioned Deborah. "Mom, I met a woman," he said, his eyes shining in a way Eleanor had never seen before. "She's an architect. She works with me on some projects. She's beautiful, intelligent, elegant." "Does she make you happy, my son?" Eleanor asked, holding her son's calloused hands between her own, even more marked by time and work. "Very, Mom. I never thought I could feel this way about someone." "Then I'm happy for you," she replied sincerely. "When will I meet her?" "I'll bring her on my next visit. I promise." 3 months later, Maurice arrived in Oxford accompanied by Deborah. Tall, with impeccably straightened brown hair, always manicured nails and designer clothes, Deborah was the personification of New York City sophistication. Upon meeting Eleanor, the young woman was extremely polite, offering her a warm hug and expensive gifts, a silver jewelry set, silk scarves, and French perfume. "Eleanor, Maurice talks so much about you. It's a pleasure to finally meet you," Deborah said, smiling broadly. "What a charming restaurant you have, so authentic." The condescending tone did not escape Eleanor, but she chose to ignore it. If her son was happy, she would be too. During that week, she observed how Deborah treated Maurice with extreme affection, always attentive to his needs, constantly praising him. With her, however, the future daughter-in-law maintained a polite distance, like someone tolerating something unpleasant out of obligation. When they announced their engagement on the last day of the visit, Eleanor hugged her son tightly. "May you both be very happy, my boy." "You'll come to New York City for the wedding, won't you, Mum?" Maurice asked eagerly. "Of course, son. I wouldn't miss it for anything." "Actually," Deborah intervened, "we were thinking of having the ceremony here in Mississippi. It would be so much easier for Eleanor." Eleanor noticed the surprised expression on her son's face. Clearly, they hadn't discussed this before. "In Oxford? But Deborah, you always said you wanted to get married in that church on the Upper East Side, near your parents' house," Maurice commented, confused. "Well, yes, But I thought about your mother. It would be complicated for her to travel all the way to New York City, organize everything. I can go to New York City without any problems, my dear, Eleanor assured her. The restaurant will be with my assistant for a few days. I've done it before. Are you sure, Eleanor? It's just a trip like that at your age. I'm 70, not 100, Eleanor replied, laughing to disguise her slight discomfort. And my son is getting married. Nothing would stop me from being there. Deborah's expression hardened for an instant, then was quickly replaced by a forced smile. Of course, how silly of me. It will be a pleasure to have you there. The wedding took place 6 months later, a luxurious ceremony for 500 guests in one of New York City's most traditional churches, followed by a reception at one of the city's most exclusive clubs. Eleanor felt out of place among so many elegant people, with their expensive jewelry and conversations about international travel. She wore the only party dress she owned, a navy blue one, simple but dignified, and the silver earrings Deborah had given her. During the reception, she barely had any time with her son. Deborah made sure to introduce him to all the important guests, dragging him from one group to another. Eleanor sat at a secluded table, occasionally chatting with some distant relatives of Maurice, whom she herself had helped raise, but who now seemed to have forgotten their humble origins. When she returned to Oxford after the wedding, Eleanor felt a strange melancholy. It was as if something had definitively ended, though she didn't know exactly what. Maurice's calls continued, but now they were less frequent. Once a week, then every 2 weeks. Often, Deborah answered, claiming her husband was busy and promising he would return the call. The promise was not always kept. Visits to Oxford also became rare. On their first wedding anniversary, Maurice called to say he couldn't come, as Deborah had organized a trip to Paris. "But I'll bring you gifts when I get back, Mom. You'll love them," he assured her. Eleanor didn't care about gifts. She just wanted her son's presence, his stories, his smile. But she understood he had his own life now. "Don't worry, my son. Enjoy the trip. Paris must be beautiful indeed." Then came the high blood pressure episode. After 2 days of feeling unwell, Eleanor fainted while preparing lunch at the restaurant. She was hospitalized for 3 days. Someone notified Maurice, who took the first plane to Mississippi. When he arrived at the hospital, he found his mother sitting on the bed, ready for discharge. "Mom, you scared me so much." "It was nothing, son, just high blood pressure. I'm already medicated and ready to go back to work." Maurice didn't accept the explanation with his usual ease. He spoke at length with the doctor, who recommended rest and constant supervision. "Your mother is no longer young enough to work so much, Mr. Maurice. She needs to take care of herself." It was then that Maurice made the decision that would change everyone's lives. "Mom, you're coming to New York City with me. You can sell the restaurant or leave it with your assistant, but you can't stay here alone anymore." "Son, I can't leave Oxford. My whole life is here." "My life is you, Mom. You always said that. And I'm in New York City. I'm going to take care of you now just like you took care of me my whole life." Her son's insistence, combined with her own fragility after the scare, made Eleanor yield. She sold the restaurant to her assistant, who had worked with her for over 10 years, packed the few physical mementos she had of her life, some photos, her husband's documents, Maurice's first school medals, and moved to New York City. In the first few days, Deborah was surprisingly attentive. She showed her the house, explained how the modern electronic appliances worked, and introduced her to the staff. Eleanor, grateful, tried to reciprocate by offering to help with household chores. "Absolutely not, Eleanor. You're here to rest. Let me and the staff take care of everything." When Maurice was home, Deborah made sure the 3 of them ate meals together, encouraged Eleanor to tell stories from the past, and showed interest in her southern recipes. "Maurice, your mother needs to teach me how to make that braised chicken stew you love so much." Eleanor even thought she had been wrong about her daughter-in-law. Perhaps Deborah was truly a good person, just a little distant due to their cultural and age differences. Maybe they could even become friends over time. This illusion lasted exactly 3 weeks. The first time Maurice traveled for work after his mother's arrival, Deborah showed her true colors. As soon as her husband's car turned the corner, she turned to her mother-in-law with an icy stare. "Well, Eleanor, now that we're alone, let's establish some rules. This is my house, and you are here as a guest, not the owner. I expect you to behave accordingly." Eleanor, surprised by the sudden change in attitude, merely nodded in silence. When we have guests, you stay in your room. I don't want any embarrassments. The people who frequent this house are sophisticated, and frankly, you wouldn't fit into the conversations." With each word, Eleanor felt as if she were being slapped. "As for meals, you will have yours separately. I don't like the way you eat, chewing too loudly, and your culinary tastes are too peculiar for our standards." But Maurice doesn't need to know these details. He already has enough worries with work. We're not going to bother him with domestic trifles, are we? And so began the reign of terror. When Maurice was home, Deborah was the perfect daughter-in-law. When he left, she transformed into a cruel tyrant. The staff quickly noticed the situation, but no one dared to intervene. Everyone depended on their jobs. Only Rose, hired by Eleanor, seemed bothered enough to act in some way. "Eleanor, this isn't right. You're the boss's mother. You shouldn't be treated like this," she commented one day, as she helped the elderly woman clean her own bathroom, a task Deborah had imposed on her as occupational therapy. "Rose, please don't say anything to Maurice. He loves this woman, and I don't want to destroy his happiness." "But Eleanor, promise, Rose, promise you won't say anything." Reluctantly, Rose promised. But she began to observe Deborah more closely, mentally registering every humiliation, every cruel word, every deprivation imposed on her mother-in-law. Someday, this knowledge would be useful. Meanwhile, Eleanor languished. Her body, once strong despite her age, began to yield to constant stress, poor nutrition, and forced isolation. She was allowed to leave the house only once a week, when Rose took her to the neighborhood supermarket to stretch her legs. In these moments, Eleanor felt alive again, talking to clerks, observing people, breathing the street air. But the freedom was short-lived. At home, when she wasn't performing the humiliating tasks imposed by Deborah, she remained confined to her room, praying the rosary, looking out the window, recalling the times when she had control over her life. What would Maurice say if he knew, she often wondered. But she quickly pushed the thought away. Her son seemed so happy, so professionally fulfilled, so in love with his wife. Who was she to destroy that? Hadn't she already sacrificed everything for him her entire life? This would just be one more sacrifice, probably the last. That night after dinner, Maurice insisted on accompanying his mother to her room. As they walked down the long corridor of the mansion, he noticed how small and fragile Eleanor seemed beside him, her steps hesitant, her shoulders hunched. She was not the strong woman he remembered from childhood, the one who woke before the sun and slept after everyone else, who carried sacks of flour as if they were feathers, who faced creditors and difficult customers without flinching. "Mom, are you really doing well here in New York City?" he asked, as he sat on the edge of his mother's bed. He looked around and, for the first time, noticed how impersonal the room was. No photos, no personal objects other than the rosary on the nightstand. Even the walls were bare, an institutional white that reminded him more of a hospital room than a home. "Of course, my son. Why wouldn't I be? I have everything I need." Eleanor smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I don't know. You seem different." "It's age, Maurice. 70 years don't come alone." Maurice observed his mother more closely. Her hands, resting on her lap, were red and had small wounds, as if she had been washing clothes without protection for hours. "Mum, what happened to your hands?" Eleanor quickly hid her hands under the blanket. "Nothing, son. An allergy to some cleaning product, I think." "Cleaning product? But why were you handling that?" "We have staff for cleaning the house." Before Eleanor could answer, Deborah appeared at the door, her usual smile on her lips. "Honey, is everything all right?" "Oh, you're talking. That's nice. I just came to let you know your bath is ready, if you want to relax before bed." She quickly glanced at Eleanor, a look full of warning that Maurice didn't notice. "I'm coming, dear. I'm worried about my mother's hands. Look how red they are." Deborah approached, feigning concern. "Oh, Eleanor, that's why I told you not to touch those garden plants. You know you have an allergy." Eleanor nodded weakly. "Yes, that was it. The plants? But Mom, you've never had a plant allergy. On the contrary, you always liked working in the restaurant's garden," Maurice argued, confused. "Honey, allergies can develop with age. I'll ask Dr. Charles to examine it at tomorrow's appointment. Now let your mother rest. She's had a long day." Reluctantly, Maurice said goodbye to his mother with a kiss on her forehead. "Sleep well, Mom. We'll talk more tomorrow." When the couple left, Eleanor allowed herself a long sigh. It was becoming increasingly difficult to hide the situation. Maurice, despite his busy routine, was beginning to notice inconsistencies in the perfect facade Deborah had built. The next day, as promised, Rose accompanied Eleanor to Dr. Charles, the family doctor. He was a kind, middle-aged man who treated his patients with genuine respect and attention. "Eleanor, you've lost 5 pounds since your last appointment, just 2 months ago. Blood pressure is still unstable, even with medication. And what happened to your hands?" the doctor asked, examining the wounds carefully. "Allergy, doctor, to garden plants." The doctor observed her carefully. "Eleanor, I've been the family doctor for years. I know everyone's history. You've never had any recorded allergies." Eleanor looked away. Rose beside her shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Is there something you want to tell me, Eleanor? Something happening at home? Any problems with your diet, perhaps?" "No, doctor. Everything's fine. I've just been eating less, really. I've lost a bit of my appetite." The doctor asked a few more questions, noted the results of the physical exam, and prescribed vitamins and dietary supplements. "I'll talk to your son about your diet. It's clearly deficient in protein and other essential nutrients. This is concerning at your age." Upon leaving the office, Rose couldn't hold back any longer. "Eleanor, this can't go on. The doctor noticed something is wrong. It's only a matter of time until Maurice notices too." "And what should I do, Rose? Tell him everything and destroy my son's marriage? He loves that woman. He loves the version of her he knows, not the real Deborah." Eleanor sighed, too tired to argue. "Let's go home. I need to be there before Deborah gets back from the beauty salon." Meanwhile, at the construction company's office, Maurice received an unexpected visitor. Teresa, his childhood friend from Oxford, who now worked as a journalist in New York City. "Teresa, it's been so long," he exclaimed, embracing his friend with genuine joy. "What brings you to New York City?" "Work, of course. I was transferred to the magazine's branch here. I've been in New York City for 2 months already." 2 months and you're only looking me up now. That's betrayal, you know." Teresa smiled, adjusting the natural curls that framed her expressive face. "Sorry, I was settling in, but I came to redeem myself. I want to see you, meet your wife, and most importantly, see Eleanor. How is she?" The mention of his mother made Maurice's smile waver slightly. "She's fine. I mean, she's aged, of course, but she's fine. She's been living with us for over a year." Eleanor in New York City, who would have thought? The woman who swore she'd never leave Oxford. Teresa laughed. She must be loving the big city. "Actually, she goes out little. She says the noise and bustle tire her." That doesn't sound like the Eleanor I knew. She loved the town fair, the hustle and bustle of the restaurant, chatting with customers. Maurice frowned, never having thought of it that way. "You're right. I guess New York City is very different from Oxford. She must miss her routine there." "Can I visit her? I'm sure she'd love to see a familiar face besides yours." "Of course. Come have dinner at our place tonight. Deborah will love meeting you, and my mother will be radiant to see you." Teresa accepted the invitation with enthusiasm. Maurice called home immediately, informing them about the special guest. Deborah answered the phone, and he didn't notice how her voice hardened upon hearing about the unexpected visit. "Your friend from Oxford? Tonight? Maurice, you know I had planned a quiet dinner, just the 3 of us. It'll be even better with Teresa. She's a journalist now. She has incredible stories to tell, and it will do my mother good to see someone from her hometown." Deborah hesitated, but knew she couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. "Of course, honey. It will be a pleasure to have her." As soon as she hung up, Deborah went straight to Eleanor's room. She found her mother-in-law sitting on the bed, drinking the tea Rose had prepared after the doctor's appointment. "We have a guest for dinner. A Teresa, a friend of Maurice's from Oxford," she announced without preamble. "You will behave, understood? No stories from the past, no complaints, no showing up at the table with those disgusting hands. I'll ask Rose to lend you a pair of gloves. And wear that blue dress I bought you. At least it disguises your skeletal body a bit." Eleanor almost dropped her cup. "Teresa is coming here. Zelda's daughter, who grew up eating at my restaurant." "I don't care whose daughter she is. I only care that she's my husband's friend, and that you won't ruin my image in front of her. Are we clear?" "Yes, Deborah. And don't call me Deborah when we have guests. It's Deb, remember? We're so close that you call me by a fond nickname." The sarcasm in her voice was palpable. When Deborah left, Eleanor felt a wave of hope for the first time in months. Teresa was perceptive, always had been since childhood. If anyone could see through Deborah's perfect facade, it was her. At 7 in the evening, the doorbell rang. Maurice personally answered it. Teresa entered, bringing flowers for Deborah and a small package for Eleanor. Deborah, impeccable in a designer dress, received the flowers with a rehearsed smile. "They're beautiful, Teresa, and it's a pleasure to finally meet one of Maurice's childhood friends. The pleasure is mine. He talks about you so much that I already feel like your friend too," Teresa replied with genuine warmth. "Where's my mother?" Maurice asked, looking around. "Finishing getting ready. You know how seniors are, they take longer with everything," Deborah replied, with a little laugh that was meant to be affectionate, but sounded condescending to Teresa's attentive ears. Shortly after, Eleanor appeared in the living room. She wore the blue dress Deborah had suggested, and a pair of thin gloves, which concealed the wounds on her hands. She looked like a frail old woman, very different from the robust and energetic woman Teresa remembered. "Aunt Eleanor!" Teresa exclaimed, hugging the elderly woman with genuine affection. She had always called her aunt, like all the children in Oxford who frequented the restaurant. "I've missed you so much. You look so elegant, but so thin. Aren't you eating that wonderful food you used to make in Oxford?" "It's just that the food in New York City is different, my dear," Eleanor replied, with a shy smile. "But I'm fine. Don't worry." Teresa observed her childhood friend interact with his mother. There was something strange about the dynamic. Maurice seemed genuinely concerned and affectionate with Eleanor, but Deborah maintained a tense posture, as if ready to intervene at any moment. And Eleanor, always so talkative and witty, answered questions with monosyllables, frequently looking at her daughter-in-law as if seeking approval. During dinner, Teresa tried several times to bring up topics about Oxford, about the restaurant, about people they knew in common. Eleanor responded briefly without elaborating. Deborah constantly interrupted, changing the course of the conversation or answering in her mother-in-law's place. "Eleanor prefers not to talk much about the past. Don't you, sweetie? It brings back memories that make her emotional," Deborah justified at one point, placing her hand on her mother-in-law's arm in a gesture that seemed affectionate, but which Teresa perceived as more of a warning than a caress. At the end of the night, as Teresa prepared to leave, she asked to use the bathroom. "It's down the hall to the right," Maurice indicated, but Teresa deliberately went down the wrong hallway, reaching Eleanor's bedroom, whose door was ajar. She quickly entered, looked around, and confirmed what she suspected. An impersonal room, without the touches of the Eleanor she knew. No photos, none of the vibrant colors she had always appreciated. She discreetly opened the wardrobe and saw only a few items of clothing, all in sober tones, very different from the colorful prints Eleanor used to wear in Oxford. Returning to the living room, she said goodbye to everyone with promises of frequent visits. As she hugged Eleanor, she whispered in her ear, "I'll be back soon, Auntie. We need to talk more." The look Eleanor gave her confirmed her suspicions. There was something very wrong in that perfect house. 3 days after dinner, Eleanor was in the kitchen, talking with Rose while the housekeeper prepared lunch. It was one of the few peaceful moments during the day, as Deborah had gone out for her weekly lunch with her club friends, an event that usually lasted 4 or 5 hours. "Eleanor, that young woman, Teresa, she noticed something, didn't she?" Rose asked as she chopped vegetables for the soup. "I think so. Teresa was always sharp ever since she was little. She had eyes that saw everything." Eleanor smiled slightly, recalling the braided girl who used to sit at the restaurant counter asking questions about everything. "Do you think she'll tell Maurice?" "I don't know, Rose. I don't know if I want her to. Maurice is so happy." "Do you really think he's happy? A man who doesn't notice his own mother wasting away under his roof. What kind of happiness is that?" Eleanor reflected on the question. In recent months, she had noticed subtle changes in her son's behavior. He seemed more tense, less cheerful. Sometimes she caught him observing her with concern when he thought she wasn't looking. "I think he's starting to suspect that something isn't right. But Deborah is very skilled at disguising things." "Well, I think this charade has gone on long enough. If you won't tell him, I will." The sound of the doorbell interrupted the conversation. Rose went to answer it, while Eleanor remained seated at the kitchen table. Minutes later, to her surprise, Teresa entered the room, accompanied by Rose. "Aunt Eleanor, so glad I found you. I hope I'm not bothering you." Teresa hugged the elderly woman affectionately. "My dear, what a pleasant surprise. But Maurice is at work and Deborah is out." "Actually, I came to talk to you. Alone," she added, looking meaningfully at Rose. The housekeeper understood the cue. "I'll finish cleaning the upstairs bedrooms. Just call if you need anything." And she left, leaving the two alone. Teresa sat at the kitchen table, holding Eleanor's hands between her own. "Auntie, what's going on here? And don't tell me everything's fine, because I know it's not." "What do you mean, my dear? I'm perfectly fine, well cared for." "Aunt Eleanor?" Teresa interrupted in a firm tone. "I'm a journalist. My job is to observe details, ask questions, connect dots, and all the dots here indicate that you are being mistreated in this house." The shock of the direct accusation filled Eleanor's eyes with tears. She tried to look away, but Teresa gently held her chin, forcing her to look at her. "Tell me the truth. For everything we've been through in Oxford, for all the history we share, tell me what's happening." It was as if a dam had broken. Eleanor began to cry, silently at first, then with sobs that shook her fragile body. Between tears, she told everything: Deborah's dual personality, the daily humiliations, the poor diet, the forced isolation, the heavy household chores she was forced to perform, the constant insults. "When Maurice is home, she's the perfect daughter-in-law. When he leaves, she turns into a monster," she concluded, wiping her tears with a napkin. Teresa listened to everything with a mixture of horror and growing anger. "Why did you never tell Maurice?" "He loves her, Teresa, and he works so hard, worries so much about me. I don't want to be an even bigger burden." "A burden? Aunt Eleanor, you have never been a burden to anyone. On the contrary, you've always carried everyone. The restaurant, the Oxford community, especially Maurice. What kind of idea is that?" "It's what Deborah tells me every day, that I'm a burden, a nuisance, that Maurice only brought me to New York City out of obligation, that deep down he'd prefer me to be in a nursing home. And you believe that? You've known your son for 45 years. How long have you known this woman? 4, 5 years? Who do you think is telling the truth about Maurice's feelings, himself, through a lifetime of actions, or this manipulative woman?" Eleanor didn't answer. Deep down she knew Teresa was right, but years of psychological manipulation had undermined her confidence. "Auntie, I'm going to help you. We're going to tell Maurice everything." "No!" Eleanor grabbed Teresa's arm with surprising strength. "Promise you won't say anything. Promise, Teresa." "But Auntie, promise. If anyone is going to tell my son anything, it will be me, when I'm ready." Teresa hesitated, but eventually agreed. "All right. I won't say anything for now, but I'll be watching. I'll visit you frequently, bring you real food, and if the situation worsens, I'll tell him everything, with or without your permission." Eleanor nodded, knowing it was the most she would get from Teresa. "Thank you, my dear. Now tell me, does the doctor know all this? Because I'm sure Dr. Charles suspected something when I saw you in his office the other day. He asks questions, but I never confirm anything. I'm afraid he'll tell Maurice and it will cause an even bigger mess. That mess needs to happen, Auntie. The sooner the better." When Teresa left, Eleanor felt strangely relieved. Sharing her burden with someone who believed in her, who didn't judge her as weak or exaggerated, had brought a comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. Unfortunately, the feeling of relief was short-lived. That same afternoon, Deborah returned earlier than usual from her lunch. Eleanor was in her room when her daughter-in-law burst through the door, her eyes flashing with anger. "What was that little journalist doing here?" she asked without preamble. "Teresa. She came to visit me," Eleanor stammered, surprised by the direct approach. "Don't lie to me. Rita from the salon saw her enter the gated community and warned me." "What did you two talk about? What did you tell her?" "Nothing. We just talked about Oxford, about people we know." Deborah approached threateningly. "I'm warning you, Eleanor. If I find out you're spreading lies about me, you'll regret it. I can convince Maurice of anything, including that you're senile and need to be institutionalized." Fear made Eleanor back away until she hit the wall. "I didn't tell her anything, I swear. Teresa just wanted to know how I'm adapting to New York City." "Well, stick to that story, understood? Or the next visit you'll receive will be from a social worker to take you to a state nursing home, one of those really bad ones, where old people are left to rot." After Deborah left, slamming the door, Eleanor fell to her knees, trembling uncontrollably. For the first time, the threat seemed too real. Deborah was no longer content with humiliating her inside the house. Now she spoke of permanently removing her from Maurice's life. The idea of ending her days in a nursing home, away from her son, was more than she could bear. That night, during dinner, Maurice noticed his mother's even deeper silence. "Is everything all right, Mom? You seem down." Before Eleanor could answer, Deborah intervened. "It must be tiredness, honey. Your mother had a visitor today. That friend of yours, Teresa, showed up by surprise. I was worried it might tire her out too much." "Teresa was here?" Maurice asked, surprised. "Why didn't you tell me, Mom? I would have come home for lunch to see her too." "It was all very quick, my son. She was just passing through." "And what did you two talk about?" Eleanor felt Deborah's gaze burning her like embers. "About Oxford. People from there. Nothing important." "Your mother has been very nostalgic lately," Deborah commented with a theatrical sigh. "Perhaps we should take her for a visit to Mississippi. What do you think, honey?" The suggestion caught Eleanor by surprise. She looked at her daughter-in-law with suspicion. "That would be great," Maurice exclaimed. "We could go next long weekend. Would you like that, Mom? Visit old friends, see how the restaurant is doing." Yes, of course," Eleanor replied, confused by Deborah's apparent kindness. Later, when Maurice had already retreated to work in his office, Deborah revealed her true intentions. She found Eleanor in the hallway and whispered with a malicious smile, "Get ready for a long stay in Oxford, Eleanor. So long that you might not even come back." "What do you mean?" "I'll convince Maurice that you'd be better off living there. We'll find a good caregiver, a comfortable house, and you'll be far from New York City, far from me and far from my husband." "But Maurice would never agree to that." "We'll see. He trusts my judgment a lot, haven't you noticed? And lately, I've been commenting on how unhappy you seem here, how much you miss the simplicity of the South. It's only a matter of time until he agrees it would be better for everyone." Deborah's plan was as cruel as it was effective, to use Eleanor's own homesickness against her, to turn her love for Mississippi into a weapon, to distance her from her son. It was too cunning for Eleanor to fight alone. That night, alone in her room, she made a decision. She could no longer remain silent. It wasn't just for her, but for her son too. What kind of life would he have beside a woman capable of such cruelty? How long until Deborah turned her claws on Maurice himself, when he was no longer useful or obedient? With trembling hands, she picked up the cell phone her son had given her months ago, which she rarely used. She found Teresa's number in her contacts and wrote a simple message. "I need your help. I'm going to tell Maurice everything, but I need proof. Deborah plans to send me back to Oxford permanently." The reply came almost instantly. "I'm on my way. Don't do anything until I get there." An hour later, Teresa arrived at the mansion. Maurice was still home working in his upstairs office. Deborah had gone out again for a charity dinner. Rose had already left. It was the perfect opportunity. "Auntie, I brought this," Teresa said, showing a small digital recorder. "We're going to record everything you have to say, every detail, every humiliation, and then we'll show it to Maurice." Eleanor nodded, determined. Yes, enough silence, enough fear. For 2 hours Eleanor spoke, meticulously describing every episode of the last 18 months, the spoiled food, the insults, the forced labor, the isolation, the threats. Teresa recorded everything, occasionally asking questions to clarify a point. By the end, both were crying. "Tomorrow we'll show this to Maurice," Teresa decided, "when Deborah is out of the house." "No," Eleanor replied, surprising the young woman. "We're going to do it now. Call my son here." "Are you sure, Auntie? You're very upset. Maybe it's better to rest and—" "Teresa, I spent months keeping silent for fear of hurting my son. Now I see that in reality I was allowing him to be deceived. What kind of mother does that? I can't wait another day." Teresa hesitated for a moment, observing the determination on Eleanor's tired face. Finally she nodded. "You're right, Auntie. I'll call him." She went upstairs to Maurice's office. She knocked lightly on the door and entered when she heard a response. Maurice was sitting behind a mahogany desk, surrounded by architectural blueprints and scale models of buildings. "Teresa? What a surprise!" he exclaimed, standing up to greet her. "I didn't know you were here. Did you come to visit my mother again?" "Yes, Maurice, and we need to talk. It's about Eleanor." His smile vanished, replaced by a worried expression. Did something happen? Is she all right? No, Maurice, she's not all right. She hasn't been all right for a long time, and she needs to speak with you now. The seriousness in Teresa's tone alarmed Maurice. Without asking further questions, he followed her to the kitchen, where he found his mother sitting at the table, her eyes red from crying so much, her hands trembling as she held a teacup. "Mom, what happened?" he asked, kneeling beside her. Eleanor took a deep breath. "My son, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." For the next hour, Eleanor recounted everything again, this time directly to her son. The transformation on Maurice's face was visible with each new revelation. Disbelief, confusion, pain, and finally a cold fury that Eleanor had never seen in her son's eyes. "Why did you never tell me?" he asked, when Eleanor finally finished her account. "I was afraid of losing you, of creating a conflict between you and the woman you love, of being an even greater burden." "A burden? Mom, you've never been a burden. After everything you've done for me, how could you think that?" That's what Deborah made me believe, day after day, month after month. Maurice ran his hands over his face, trying to process everything he had heard. "And I never noticed. I was so busy, so blind." "She's very skilled, Maurice," Teresa intervened. "Narcissistic people like Deborah are experts at creating a facade, at manipulating, at making victims doubt their own sanity." "Did Rose know all this?" Maurice asked, referring to the housekeeper. "Yes, but I made her promise not to say anything. She wanted to, but I begged her not to." Maurice stood up, determined. "This ends today. I can't allow it to continue for another day." At that moment, they heard the sound of the front door opening. Deborah had returned from the charity dinner earlier than expected. The three in the kitchen tensed, like cornered animals facing a predator. "Maurice? Where are you, honey?" Deborah's syrupy voice echoed through the house. "I'm in the kitchen," he replied, in a neutral tone that revealed nothing of the turmoil of emotions consuming him. Deborah appeared at the door, still in her party dress and the expensive jewelry she had worn to the event. Her smile froze when she saw Teresa sitting with Eleanor and Maurice. "Oh, we have company. What a pleasant surprise. If you had told me, honey, I would have come back from dinner earlier." "Teresa didn't come to visit me, Deborah. She came to see my mother." Something in Maurice's tone made Deborah's smile falter. "That's good. Your mother loves visitors, doesn't she, Eleanor?" Her gaze conveyed a clear threat to her mother-in-law, but Eleanor was not intimidated this time. Sitting upright in her chair with a dignity she seemed to have regained in the last few minutes, she met her daughter-in-law's gaze. "Yes, Deborah, especially visits that allow me to speak the truth." Deborah's smile vanished completely. "I don't know what you're talking about. It must be tiredness. It's past time for you to retire, don't you think?" "No, Deborah," Maurice interrupted, placing himself between his mother and his wife. "It's past time for the truth to come out. I know everything. The mistreatment, the humiliations, the spoiled food, the forced labor. Everything." Deborah visibly paled, but quickly recovered. "What are you talking about, Maurice? Your mother must be confused, mixing things up. You know how elderly people can be imaginative." "Don't insult my intelligence, Deborah. I heard everything in detail, and it wasn't just my mother who told me. Teresa also saw signs. Rose witnessed everything, even Dr. Charles suspected something was wrong. And you're going to believe them instead of your own wife." Deborah's voice rose an octave, indignant. "After everything we've built together, because of unproven accusations from an old woman who is clearly jealous of our happiness?" "Unproven?" Teresa interjected, showing the digital recorder. "We have everything recorded, Deborah. Every detail, every humiliation. Do you want to hear it?" Deborah's face contorted into an expression of pure hatred. "You!" she pointed at Teresa. "Nosy little journalist. What do you get out of this? Are you interested in my husband, is that it? Do you think you can destroy my marriage and take my place?" "This has nothing to do with me, Deborah," Teresa replied calmly. "It's about how you treated an elderly woman who did nothing but welcome you into her family with open arms. A woman who raised the man you claim to love, alone with sacrifice and dignity." "Maurice," Deborah turned to her husband, instantly changing tactics. Tears began to well up in her eyes, calculatedly. "You can't believe this. I love your mother. I've always treated her as if she were my own. If there's been any misunderstanding, we can resolve it. I'm willing to do family therapy, to hire a private nurse for her, Whatever you want, but don't destroy our marriage because of a misunderstanding." Maurice looked at his wife with an expression that mixed disgust and sadness. "I never thought you were capable of something like this, Deborah. The woman I thought I married would never do what you did. You mistreated my mother, the most important person in my life, the woman who gave me everything I have, who sacrificed her youth, her health, her own needs to give me a future." "Exactly, Maurice. She sacrificed for you. She was a good mother. No one denies that. But now it's time for you to live your own life, to have our family, our children. Your mother has had her role. Now it's time for her to... For her to what, Deborah?" Maurice's voice was sharp as a blade. "To be discarded? To be hidden in a corner until she passes away? Is that what you think a mother deserves after a lifetime of dedication?" "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant, and you'd probably do the same to your own parents if they weren't rich enough to be useful to you." "Don't bring my parents into this discussion." Deborah was losing control. "You're being irrational. Are you going to throw away 5 years of marriage over a misunderstanding with a senile old woman?" "I'm going to throw away 5 years of a lie, because that's what our marriage was. A lie. The woman I married doesn't exist. It was just a role you played until you got what you wanted." "And what did I want, Maurice?" Deborah's tone was defiant now, abandoning her victim posture. "My money, my status, the mansion, the jewels, the trips, the parties. It was never about love. It was about what I could give you." Deborah laughed, a cold, cruel sound that revealed her true nature. "You've always been so naive, Maurice. Do you really think a woman like me from a traditional New York City family, educated in the best schools, would marry a nouveau riche southerner for love? Of course, it was for what you could give me, and you gave generously. I can't complain." The explicit cruelty shocked even Teresa, who had seen much in her journalistic career. Eleanor, however, did not seem surprised. She had faced this cruelty daily, in the silence of her gilded cage. "Get out of my house," Maurice ordered, with a calm that was more threatening than any shout. "Now. This house is as much mine as it is yours. I am your wife. I have rights. We have a prenuptial agreement, Deborah. You will receive what is stipulated in it, not a cent more. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. Now take some clothes and leave. The rest of your belongings will be sent wherever you indicate." "You can't just kick me out like this. I have rights. I have proof of elder abuse under your roof. Do you want me to call the police and discuss your rights with them?" Deborah paled again. She knew Maurice wasn't bluffing, and a criminal accusation, even if it didn't result in a conviction, would destroy her carefully constructed image in New York City high society. "All right, I'll go to my parents' house. But don't think this is over, Maurice. I'll fight for what's mine. And as for you," she turned to Eleanor, venom in her voice, "I hope you're satisfied. You got what you wanted, to have your son all to yourself again." "I never wanted that," Eleanor replied with dignity. "I just wanted to be treated with a minimum of respect and humanity. Things that you, with all your expensive education and family name, seem never to have learned." Deborah cast one last hateful glance at everyone in the kitchen and left, her high heels clacking on the marble floor. Minutes later, they heard her descending the stairs with 2 suitcases, and then the sound of the front door slamming shut. A heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Maurice collapsed into a chair, looking as if he had aged 10 years in the last few minutes. "Mom, forgive me. I had no idea." "There's nothing to forgive, my son. You didn't know." "But I should have noticed. The signs were all there. Your weight loss, your sadness, your isolation. How could I have been so blind?" "When we love someone, we often only see what we want to see." Eleanor held her son's hand. "The important thing is that now you know the truth, and you can move forward." Teresa, realizing that mother and son needed privacy, discreetly stood up. "I'll be going. You two need to talk." "No," Maurice held her arm. "Please stay. You were the one who had the courage to bring this to light when everyone else was in denial. We are grateful for that." Eleanor agreed, squeezing the young woman's hand. "Without you, I would still be suffering in silence, my dear." Teresa smiled, touched. "You're my family too, in a way. I couldn't just stand by and watch Eleanor waste away." The 3 stayed in the kitchen late into the night, talking, sometimes crying, planning the future. Maurice made a solemn promise to his mother. "From now on, I will take care of you, as you took care of me my whole life, with love, respect, and dedication." Eleanor smiled, feeling as if an immense weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in almost 2 years, she breathed freely, without fear. She looked at her son, the boy she had raised with so much sacrifice, who had become an honorable man despite the setbacks, and knew that finally she would be safe. Before retiring, she hugged Maurice for a long time. "I love you, my son. Never doubt that." "I love you too, Mom, and I promise I'll never fail you again." That night, Eleanor slept deeply, without nightmares, without waking startled, fearing the arrival of morning. She dreamed of Oxford, of the restaurant, of the customers she treated like family. But for the first time, it was not a dream of desperate longing, but of sweet memories of a life well lived. When she woke up, the sun was already high. She was startled for a moment, thinking Deborah would be furious for her sleeping in late. Then she remembered the events of the previous night and relaxed. Deborah was no longer there. The era of fear had ended. She got up, dressed in her own clothes, not the ones Deborah had imposed on her, and left the room. The house seemed different, lighter, as if a dark cloud had dissipated. She went to the kitchen where she found Maurice preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Mum. Did you sleep well? I'm making that corn cake you love so much. I hope I haven't forgotten the recipe." "Good morning, my son. I slept like I haven't in years." Eleanor smiled, approaching to examine the cake batter. "It's missing a little cinnamon, but the rest looks perfect." Maurice added the cinnamon, laughing. "See, I still need you to teach me things. And I'll always be here for that, my son, always." They had breakfast together, conversing with a freedom Eleanor hadn't felt since arriving in New York City. Maurice talked about his work projects, his hopes for the future, and Eleanor shared stories from Oxford that she had never dared to mention in Deborah's presence. "I was thinking, Mom," Maurice said, as he poured more coffee for both of them, "how about we redecorate the house, make it more us? Deborah chose everything, every piece of furniture, every color, and I never really cared much about it. But now I want it to be a real home for us." "That would be wonderful, son. We could add some plants, make it more colorful, and maybe transform that room we never use into a space for you to work on your projects." Maurice's eyes lit up. "Perfect. And what do you think about visiting Oxford next month? Not to stay, as Deborah planned, but to satisfy your longing, see how the restaurant is doing, reconnect with friends." "I would love that." Eleanor smiled, touched. Her son truly listened to her, truly cared about her wishes and feelings. The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. Maurice went to answer it, and returned accompanied by Teresa, who was carrying a basket of fresh fruit and bread. "Good morning, family," the young woman exclaimed, hugging Eleanor affectionately. "I brought that homemade cream cheese you like, Aunt Eleanor. You spoil me too much, child. Sit down. Breakfast is on the table." As they savored breakfast, Maurice shared his restaurant idea with Teresa. "That would be perfect," she exclaimed, enthusiastic. "I can already see the name, Eleanor's Flavors or something like that. I can help with the promotion. I know several food journalists who would love to do stories about an authentic Southern cuisine restaurant." Eleanor watched the two, touched by the support and enthusiasm they showed. How life had changed in just 3 months, from a prisoner in her own home to the owner of a potential new restaurant, from a silent victim to a respected and valued woman. "All right, you win," she said finally. "We're opening the restaurant, but with one condition: I want it to be a family business, the 3 of us as partners." Maurice and Teresa exchanged glances, surprised. "Mom, you don't need to include us as partners. The restaurant will be yours as it was in Oxford." "No, son. In Oxford, I was alone raising you. I needed the restaurant to be solely mine to ensure our livelihood. Here it's different. I'm at a stage in life where I want to share, not accumulate. I want to leave a legacy, to build something that continues even when I'm no longer here." "Don't talk like that, Auntie," Teresa interrupted, holding Eleanor's hand. "You'll still see this restaurant celebrate its golden anniversary." Eleanor smiled. "Perhaps. But either way, I want it to be ours. All 3 of us." The sincerity and emotion in Eleanor's words moved Maurice and Teresa. He, who had grown up seeing his mother work tirelessly alone, understood the profound meaning of that proposal. She, who had known Eleanor since childhood and witnessed her recent suffering, recognized the gesture as an affirmation of trust and gratitude. "All right, Mom, we'll be partners." I don't know what to say," Teresa confessed. "It's a huge honor, Aunt Eleanor. Then don't say anything. Just help us make this restaurant a success, as I know it will be. The three toasted with coffee, sealing the agreement that marked not only the beginning of a commercial venture, but a new phase in everyone's lives. For Eleanor, it was a chance to resume something she had always loved doing, now with her son's support and participation. For Morris, it was an opportunity to give back to his mother, to bring her joy and purpose. For Teresa, it was the realization of the special bond she had always had with the family that had welcomed her in childhood. In the following weeks, the restaurant project advanced rapidly. Maurice, using his contacts in civil construction, secured excellent professionals for the renovation of the space. Eleanor personally got involved in choosing kitchen equipment, selecting the recipes for the initial menu, and training the first employees. Teresa, in turn, handled the publicity strategy, securing features in important media outlets and organizing a pre-opening event for influencers and journalists. Working together on this common project, Maurice and Teresa naturally grew closer. Their childhood friendship, interrupted by the years they lived in different cities, blossomed into something new, deeper. Eleanor observed their interaction with a discreet smile, without interfering, just hoping her son would find true happiness with Teresa, a happiness he hadn't had with Deborah. Meanwhile, the situation with Maurice's ex-wife was moving towards a resolution. As promised, he had offered Deborah exactly what was stipulated in the prenuptial agreement, a fixed sum of money and an apartment. Initially, she had threatened to legally contest it, claiming she was entitled to much more. But when Maurice mentioned the recordings of the mistreatment against Eleanor, suggesting he could use them as proof of unworthy conduct if the lawsuit proceeded, Deborah backed down. She accepted the agreement, albeit resentfully, and moved to the coast where, according to rumors, she was already involved with an older and richer businessman than Maurice. Better this way, Eleanor commented, when she learned Deborah had accepted the agreement. Let her live her life and we'll live ours. On the morning of the inauguration of Eleanor's Flavors, the restaurant was impeccable. The decor blended traditional Southern elements with modern touches. The solid wood tables, the colorful hammocks on the verandas, the clay pots with plants typical of the southern countryside. Everything evoked Eleanor's origins without falling into stereotype or folkloric excess. The menu, handwritten on artisanal paper, offered authentic dishes from Mississippi cuisine, highlighting the specialties that had made the original restaurant in Oxford famous. Eleanor, dressed in a coral-toned linen ensemble, her white hair styled in an elegant bun, supervised the final preparations in the kitchen. At 72, she felt revitalized, as if the last 2 years of suffering had been just a distant nightmare. Maurice entered the kitchen, elegant in a light suit. "Mom, it's almost time. The first guests are already arriving." Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling a mix of anxiety and excitement. "I'm ready, my son." Together, they went out to the main dining area where Teresa awaited them, stunning in a dress patterned with southern motifs. The three positioned themselves at the restaurant's entrance to greet the guests. The event was an absolute success. Food critics, journalists, influencers, and close friends filled the restaurant, tasting the dishes prepared under Eleanor's watchful eye and listening to the stories she told about each recipe, about her life in Oxford, about the Southern culinary tradition. "This shrimp bobo, for example," she explained to a group of guests, "I learned from a lady from Alabama who frequented my restaurant in Oxford. She insisted the secret was in the texture of the cassava and the perfect proportion of palm oil. It took me years to master the recipe exactly as she taught it." The listeners delighted not only in the food, but in Eleanor's rich narrative, her authenticity, the evident passion in every word. Maurice watched his mother with pride, seeing her flourish before his eyes, regaining the vivacity and charisma that had always characterized her. At one point in the evening, when the event was at its peak, Maurice asked for everyone's attention. He positioned himself beside his mother, in the center of the restaurant, with Teresa just behind them. "I want to thank everyone for being here on this very special night," he began. "This restaurant is more than just a business for us. It's the celebration of a journey, a life story, of overcoming adversity and new beginnings. It's the embodiment of the spirit of an extraordinary woman, my mother Eleanor, who taught me everything I know about hard work, honesty, perseverance, and unconditional love." Eleanor's eyes welled up as her son continued his speech. "Many of you know only part of our story. You know we came from Oxford, that my mother ran a restaurant there for decades, that she raised me alone after my father's early passing. What you might not know is that in recent years, my mother faced challenges that would have broken people with half her strength. But she resisted, survived, and is here today, not as a victim, but as a victor. Maurice paused, visibly moved. Teresa approached, placing a hand on his shoulder in a gesture of support. Eleanor's Flavors is not just a restaurant. It's a symbol that it's never too late to start anew, to pursue dreams, to build something new. And it's also my way of telling this incredible woman how much I love and admire her. Turning to his mother, Maurice concluded, "Mom, this place is yours. Your legacy, your kingdom, your stage. May it bring you the joy you deserve, and may it be just the first chapter of this new phase of our lives." Eleanor, with tears in her eyes, hugged her son for a long time, while the emotional guests applauded. When they separated, she took the floor, her voice firm despite the emotion. "I thank you all for sharing this moment with us. As my son said, this restaurant represents a new beginning. At 72, many would think it's too late to start something new. But I've learned that it's never too late when you have passion, purpose, and people who believe in you." Looking at Maurice and Teresa, she continued, "I am blessed to have by my side a son who is my greatest pride and a young woman who, even without blood ties, has become so important in our lives. This restaurant is ours, all three of us, and of everyone who, like you, believes that food is much more than sustenance. It is memory, it is affection, it is history." The applause was warm. The moved guests continued the night celebrating, savoring the dishes, conversing, creating the welcoming atmosphere Eleanor had always imagined for her new restaurant. In the days and weeks that followed the inauguration, Eleanor's Flavors became an immediate success. Glowing reviews in major media outlets, enthusiastic word of mouth, and consistent food quality ensured a full house every night. Eleanor, dividing her time between supervising the kitchen and circulating among the tables, chatting with customers, had found a new purpose, a reason to wake up excited every morning. Maurice, maintaining his construction business but dedicating significant time to the restaurant, was surprised by the satisfaction he felt in this new venture. More than the financial success, which was considerable, it pleased him to see his mother happy, fulfilled, respected. And it had also brought him even closer to Teresa, with whom he now maintained a relationship that went beyond friendship and professional partnership. On a quiet evening, 6 months after the inauguration, the three were gathered at the restaurant after closing. Sitting at a corner table with a bottle of wine between them, they celebrated the successful semester. "I never thought that at 72 I'd be starting a new business in New York City," Eleanor confessed, smiling. "Life truly is a box of surprises." "Good surprises, I hope," Maurice commented, pouring more wine for everyone. "The best," Eleanor replied, looking affectionately at her son and Teresa. "I'm exactly where I should be with the people I love." Teresa raised her glass. "A toast, then. To Eleanor, the strongest and most inspiring woman I've ever known. To Maurice, who proved that a son can be his mother's best friend. And to the three of us, this family we chose to form." "To family," Maurice agreed, clinking his glass against theirs. "To life," Eleanor completed, "with all its twists and turns, pains and joys. May we always have the courage to start anew, the wisdom to recognize what truly matters, and the love to transform every challenge into an opportunity." The glasses clinked, sealing not just the toast, but the implicit promise that, together, they would continue building a story of overcoming affection and achievements. A story that had begun in a small restaurant in Oxford and was now gaining new chapters in New York City. A story of a mother and son who, despite all obstacles, rediscovered each other, and in the process discovered that family is not defined by blood ties or social conventions, but by sincere love and mutual respect. And as they savored the wine and made plans for the future, Eleanor knew that finally she could relax. The long journey of trials had come to an end. Her son truly saw her now, not as a burden or an obligation, but as the strong and valuable woman she had always been, and that, more than any material success, was the greatest victory she could wish for. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Eleanor and Maurice's story has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here by clicking on the left. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and human relationships. Don't miss our upcoming content. We eagerly await your comments.